quý vị khán giả của chương trình SBTN. Thưa quý vị, trong những ngày gần đây, nghị trường nước Úc đang nóng lên với cuộc tranh cãi xung quanh kế hoạch thay đổi điều kiện 18C của đạo luật chống phân biệt chủng tộc do Thủ tướng Malcolm Turnbull khởi xướng. Trước hết, xin được nhắc lại với quý vị về điều luật 18C. Đạo luật chống phân biệt chủng tộc được ban hành từ năm 1975 và điều 18C là điều khoản được đưa vào năm 1995 với mục đích ngăn cấm việc xúc phạm, lăng mạ, làm nhục hoặc hăm dọa người khác dựa vào sắc tộc, màu da hay quốc tịch của người đó. Ở Úc, những điều khiếu nại về chuyện bị phân biệt chủng tộc có thể được đệ trình lên Ủy ban Nhân quyền, cơ quan sẽ điều tra, bác bỏ khiếu nại hoặc có thể quyết định có cần tiến tới hòa giải hay không. Trong kế hoạch thay đổi điều 18C của đạo luật chống phân biệt chủng tộc, Thủ tướng Malcolm Turnbull muốn giữ lại chữ hăm dọa, nhưng chỉ muốn sử dụng một từ duy nhất, đó là harass, quấy nhiễu, để thay thế vào ba từ xúc phạm, lăng mạ, làm nhục. Lý do của việc thay đổi, theo ông Turnbull, là vì sự cân bằng và sử dụng ngôn ngữ phù hợp để bảo vệ tự do ngôn luận. Tuy nhiên, kế hoạch này bị đảng Lao động và đảng Xanh phản đối mạnh mẽ. Đại diện của nhiều nhóm sắc tộc cũng lo ngại rằng việc sử dụng một chữ quấy nhiễu mang tính chung chung và sẽ giảm khả năng bảo vệ một bộ phận người dân Úc bị kỳ thị chủng tộc. Chúng tôi đã mời đến studio của SBTN Úc Châu ông Tony Burke để tìm hiểu thêm về lý do đảng Lao động phản đối kế hoạch thay đổi điều 18C của đạo luật chống kỳ thị chủng tộc. Good afternoon, Mr. Tony Burke. Thank you so much for coming to have a conversation with us today. There has been conversation surrounding the Discrimination Act, Section 18C, in the media at the moment. In your opinion, why there has been such debate?
We've had a section of the Racial Discrimination Act which says people can't insult, offend, humiliate other people on the basis of their race. And in very recent times, there's been some examples of the Human Rights Commission taking a very long time to make decisions when complaints were made. And some of those complaints turned out that they didn't meet the threshold anyway, that they weren't a problem, but the problem became that it took so long to make the change. So there is a need for us to change the law so that the processes can deal with complaints more quickly. That does need to happen. But the government has gone one step further. They haven't just said deal with complaints more quickly, they've also said lower the threshold to allow some things that are currently not allowed to be said because they're forms of racial hate speech, and to allow them to be said. So the words insult, offend, humiliate, they want to get rid of them out of the Act and insert the word harass, which means there's a whole lot of racial abuse that's currently unlawful that they want to make lawful.
The proposal changes has raised issues about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean people can say anything, and there should be law that implement to protect people. What is your comment on this?
But for the Vietnamese community, too many people already experience racial abuse in public places, whether it be they're just minding their own business on the train on the way home, or just going out wanting to do the shopping and receiving forms of racial hate speech, racial insults, racial abuse, racial humiliation. And I don't see, and Labor doesn't see, how weakening the protections against that, how allowing more racial hate speech could ever be a good thing for Australia.
Yeah.
No one knows exactly where the line, how far, how much of a step backwards this will be until the courts start making decisions. But the one thing we do know is that there will be more racial abuse permitted after this change than there is right now. And so, from my perspective, I don't know, exactly what sentences will be allowed to be said, but I do know that some forms of racial abuse that are currently not allowed will become allowed, that there will be permission given, licence given for more racial abuse than we have in Australia right now. And I've got to say, I just don't see how that can ever be good for Australia. I think the key here is look at the people who are saying it's all about freedom of speech, it's just words. And almost without exception, they are people who have never experienced racial abuse.
And how would this proposal affect the multicultural society of Australia, and how does this affect the community, the Vietnamese community in particular?
Now, it's easy to say it's just words if it's a hurt you'll never feel. It's easy to say it's just words if you'll never have to explain to your children why someone was shouting at you in the shopping centre. Then you can say it's just words. But for the people, particularly the Vietnamese community, who love Australia, who are good citizens, but have to deal with this already, anything that makes that problem worse has to be bad for the country.
So in light of that, what do you think the effect would be if this law is to be passed in the Parliament?
Okay. Take whatever levels of racial abuse...
How would that affect the community, in particular the Vietnamese community?
The effect will be this. Take whatever levels of racial insults, racial abuse people already experience, and know there will be more of it. Exactly how much more, we don't know. Okay. But we do know whatever level of insults, of abuse, of offence, of humiliation people experience right now, that will increase if this change happens.
On that note, you see, there are people who would argue that shifting the word around is also putting focus on different people. People feel hurt, that's up to them to feel hurt. How do you think negative comment based on racial discrimination would affect people, in your opinion?
Words can be devastating. Words can be extraordinarily harmful. And many people will carry scars from racial insults and abuse their entire lives. So I just don't accept this argument that it's just words. I don't accept this argument of, well, people need freedom of speech. Yeah, if you think of the situation, which I've witnessed, but I haven't lived, but that situation where somebody is on a bus, a member of the Vietnamese community, and someone else is throwing insults at them. Now, if you look at those two people, which person should the law be helping? Should we be saying we need to protect the person who's trying to mind their own business and just catch a bus home? Or should we be saying we need to make sure there's more freedom of speech for the person delivering the insults? And once you realise that's where this law kicks in, I think it's pretty clear. We need to let the person who just wants to travel home safely and mind their own business and not be troubled, that's the person who needs the protection. The person throwing insults around, they're not the victim in this situation.
You know, on that note, why do you think then the government, instead of trying to allow people to have more voice, have lower the bar, as people would say, to go to the extent of changing this law? Why do you think the present government, feel there's the need to do that?
Sadly, I think, and I don't like venturing into the politics of it because the issue is so important, but I've got to say the motivation for this, every time you look at it, is political. Malcolm Turnbull 2 years ago didn't hold this view. Malcolm Turnbull a few years ago used to be saying the same things that I'm saying to you right now. There's a lot of division within his party. There are a number of extreme elements within his party who believe that this is the freedom of speech for people to be able to say whatever they want is one of the most significant causes for the Liberal Party they could ever fight. And he has caved in to them to keep his own job as Prime Minister, to avoid instability within his party. Now, I wish the answer to your question was something different to that, but when you look at what's changed that's caused him to change his mind in the last couple of years, I think it's pretty simple. he, as he has on so many other issues, has caved into extreme elements to a policy where he used to believe the exact opposite.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burke. I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering though that, I mean, a lot of people have great admiration for the Labor Party and for yourself, who've done a great job in fighting for justice and for social justice, as in this case. So what would be your plan in order to, in light of the change of this section 18C, what is your plan to counter or helping the community to understand or process these changes?
I think the best way for us to show people that hate speech is wrong is to celebrate who we are, is to celebrate modern multicultural Australia and to effectively put on display the strength of the diversity we have. So I'm organising on Friday next week, so that's Friday the 31st of March. In the afternoon, between people are arriving at 5 and at 5:30 in Lakemba, just up from the train station, we're all walking together through the streets of Lakemba. We've got Chinese and Vietnamese lions and dragons. We've got drums from around the world. We've got Aboriginal music. And the idea is not to have an angry protest. The idea is you don't deal with hate speech by shouting back. You deal with hate speech by celebrating who we are and showing people that the diversity of modern multicultural Australia is our greatest strength. So even though I'm one of the people organising it, we're not badging it as a Labor Party event, we're giving it over as a community celebration. And we've decided to just invite everybody to Lakemba on Friday the 31st, arrive at 5, we start walking at 5:30 and bring the children. There'll be no chanting, nothing angry about it, just a straight celebration of modern multicultural Australia. That's why we've called it the Walk for Respect.